Commissioner Ryan?
I put item 83 on the agenda to inform my colleagues about the status of negotiations and discussions that I have had with Weston Mayor Dan Sturmer in relation to the 3/4 penny transportation surtax that was passed 2 weeks ago by the County Commission, the infrastructure tax that had been adopted by a majority of the cities of the population in Broward County and has been submitted to the Supervisor of Elections, and also the third ordinance, which we had on first reading, agreed to publish with regard to a infrastructure tax of 1 penny, with 15% being paid to the county for economic development. I want to thank Mayor Sturmer. He's been a real gentleman. He's a very intelligent man, understands the issue very well, and although we have not reached a point where there's something that I can bring back that I would recommend to the County Commission, I will say that he has a lot of excellent ideas and thinks through the process quite well, so I compliment you, Mayor Sturmer. So it was some time ago that we, on the County Commission, made a policy decision that we found transportation and improvements in transportation with regard to mobility and reducing traffic congestion to be a priority for Broward County, for economic development, for betterment of the quality of life for the citizens of Broward County. As you know, I have, for the past year, been working with the cities, primarily through the MPO, to try to come to a consensus position with regard to a penny sales tax for transportation. We were at a point where there was a 30% direct allotment to the cities, and the balance would be paid over to the county for regional transportation needs. That proposal ended up being rejected at the MPO level, and the cities came forward with a proposal for a penny sales tax for infrastructure. Does not have a sunset, does not have oversight board, and it would be 60% paid over to the cities, 40% to the county per the statutory requirement for the division of the proceeds. So we came back, as I said, 2 weeks ago, and we passed a transportation surtax ballot question. All of these proposals for a surtax require a approval by a majority of the voters. They're scheduled for the general election in November of this year. We're pretty far apart. The city's position, as provided to me by Mayor Sturmer, is that the cities would agree to the county moving forward with a half penny for transportation and a half penny that would go to infrastructure, and the half penny going to infrastructure would be paid 100% to the cities. I had expressed my concerns that 1/2 penny would not be sufficient for the significant transportation challenges that we have today in Broward County and that we anticipate with a growing population over the next several decades. We have plans for rail in portions of the county and for improving mass transit with our bus service, for traffic light synchronization, improvement of regional roads, and other roadway improvements that, as I said, would improve the movement of traffic and persons throughout Broward County. So I'm willing to continue discussions, and I just wanted to bring it back to this board to let you know the position right now of the cities seems to be pretty firm of a half penny for infrastructure, and it is a policy decision. I mean, it's a balance. I mean, you only have so much money to go around, and so we can continue the discussions, but, you know, I look at what the Florida Department of Transportation has in their roadway plans and in their vision statement what the MPO's 2040 mobility plan is, what the United States Department of Transportation, and all of this is related to the expansion and improvement of multimodal transportation. And in order to accomplish that, it is the belief of staff in Broward County, and I believe you members, that we have a level of funding that is required in order to reach these objectives. So with that, I know you have a number of speakers that wish to be recognized, and we can have further comment at the end of the discussion from the public. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Ryan. We now have not a whole lot of members of the public, but a number of members that are asking to speak, and it appears that even though you're not first on my thing, you're walking up, so let me find you. You know, so it's true, you've been moved. So you are. The first speaker would be Mayor Sturmer of Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Commissioners, good morning. Thank you, Commissioner Ryan, for putting this agenda item on, and thank you for your time last Thursday afternoon, and for your conversations that started 2 weeks ago tomorrow, after we were all last here. Thank you to Ms. Coffey for arranging the meeting last Thursday. I stand here before you, hopefully on behalf of all of the city electeds and their staff that are here, as the only speaker on this item on behalf of the cities. We want to thank you and work collaboratively with you. Last Thursday evening at 11:15, I sent you all an email that further clarified the proposal that Commissioner Ryan just said. Some of the issues that I laid out in the email and the cities are prepared to stand by today include the insertion of a sunset provision 25 years out, prepared to have the creation of an oversight board that would have the 5 members as proposed by Commissioner Ryan. We'd figure out the dynamic of where your 3 would come from, but 2 would come from the city side, 1 from the BCCMA and 1 from the Broward League of Cities, none of them elected officials. We also agreed that somewhere between 10 and 25% of the infrastructure dollars would be spent by cities on average on transit, transportation, or mobility-related projects. All of this supplements and benefits your transportation needs, roadway systems, congestion, things that go on in cities. Infrastructure is a pretty broad subject, yes, but the infrastructure that would be contemplated in good measure would supplement what you're contemplating. You know what? The first plan that came out from Broward County was a penny. It's now been reduced to 3/4 of a penny. We stand here today and ask you to join arms with us to present a unified front to the voters in Broward County. You know what? We can dicker all we want. It's going to be up to the people that vote in November. And on behalf of the city elected officials and staff, and I'd ask you all to please rise. We stand here on behalf of 94% of the population and ask you to move forward with the proposal that would give half a penny to transportation to Broward County, half a penny of infrastructure to the cities, which would include the unincorporated portion of Broward County. You'd administer it between your municipal services district, but it would come out of our portion. We'd agree to a sunset, we'd agree to an oversight, and we would agree to commit between 10 and 25% towards transit, transportation, and mobility projects. Thank you for your positive consideration. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor Sturmer. The next person on the queue is Mr. Russell Rand. Russell? Hey, Russell.
The smell of money. That being said, government's a necessary evil. It's absolutely necessary and inherently evil, and I stand here because of that. And if you start to build a simple mousetrap, you end up with a Rube Goldberg contraption that defies logic and has nothing to do with the original mousetrap. I wonder what happened to the money that should have gone to the infrastructure and transportation over the 42 years that I've been here. And why you need to jack up the taxes to make up for it. It's when you play a shell game, you end up somebody not sitting down at the table. I would like to think that this went to a useful purpose, but as has been pointed out, this is a regressive tax against people of poorness and people of color in particular, such as myself. I used to have a home, but I no longer have a home because of this. So you could jack my taxes up on my home. That's what you should do. And you're doing micro skimming of the property millage rate and taxes today. But yet you're trying to jack up the sales tax that's going to tax the person behind the tree, always, which is somebody else. But as has been shown here, the little people are not really heard in these processes well enough. And there are people who are salivating for that money, I'm sure. I don't want to name any names. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Rand. The next person on the queue is Dan Lindblade, the president of the Fort Lauderdale Chamber of Commerce. Hi, Dan. Welcome.
Morning. Mayor, thank you. Commissioners, staff, county administrator. The Chamber of Commerce, we have 1,300 members representing about 500,000 employees throughout the county. We're just one of 17 chambers in the county. And we have not come out with a position on the surtax to date because we don't know what it is. We see all these different proposals. Every time I come to a meeting, it seems to change. And the players seem to change. I was very pleased with Mayor Sturmer's testimony here today. And what we're asking you guys to do is come together because this is us. This is Broward County. This is the cities. This is the business community. This is our churches. We live here together, and we need you as a county leadership to build this consensus and common ground. If you don't, I don't think that at least our chamber is going to be able to support a multifaceted, competing interests type of voting mechanism in November. So what we're looking for is clear oversight, clear items that are going to be pushed forward, whether it's transit or infrastructure. What we're looking for is for us as a community, elected officials, business leaders, and citizens to come together and say, we recognize we have problems. We recognize we have shortcomings. Not everybody's going to get everything, and some people are not, or most people are not going to be happy with the final end product. As you all know, as elected officials, that's usually the sign of something good. When you don't get everything that you wanted to begin with, but you drive something that is going to be for the ultimate good, that's going to keep our economic prosperity moving forward. And so I encourage you, Mayor and Commissioners, to come up with that solution in short order. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. The next person on queue is Mayor Mike Ryan of Sunrise.
I stand in support of my learned colleague from Western, Mayor Sturmer, and waive my time. Thank you.
Thank you. And the final person on is Charles Calkins. Charlie, you should have been a doctor, not a lawyer, because it's the worst handwriting I've ever seen. No, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. Just kidding.
Don't tell my secretary that. Mayor, Commissioners, thank you for the opportunity this morning to talk with you for a few minutes about the transportation and infrastructure surtaxes. The workshop understands the importance for the ability of business people, visitors, our employees, to move around from one location to the next. It's really important in Broward County, and we owe it to the people in Broward County for the quality of life that we have to have an effective way to transport ourselves, move around the county. We've been on this issue for a long time, and there's no dispute from Mayor Sturmer and the cities that there's infrastructure needs, but we think there's really transportation needs, and those needs are preeminent, and they are the ones that we're focused on. We're a growing community. We want to maintain the vibrancy of Broward County, and it's an integrated metropolitan area. We want to attract new businesses. We want to retain new businesses. To do that, we've got to have an effective transportation system that works. Now, that being said, the workshop has looked at the two issues, the two surtaxes, and we've got some concerns about them, and we've expressed them in writing, and I think you've all received our position on this. 2 1/2-cent proposals to the ballot is going to be confusing, like Dan just said. Having 2 half-cent proposals on the ballot is going to be confusing. I think we'll probably doom both of them. I don't think the taxpayers are going to understand them, and I think they're going to look at it as 2 different tax grabs that are not going to necessarily make sense to them. So what happens if one passes and one loses? And those kind of complications. Another concern we have is we're 13 days before the supervisor of election says you've got to get the ballot language to her. 13 days to put all this together and come up with something that would be effective and work, I don't think it will work. We need to actually focus on that sacred penny and how it's going to be used, how it's going to get agreed to by the voters. The Broward Workshop has previously recommended that rather than rushing to the situation, please take the time to work with the cities, work together. 2018 is the time to put this on. Give ourselves a couple years to get this thing together, get everybody on the same page, and figure out what's the best solution for Broward County. Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. That was our last public speaker, so now we're moving back to the County Commission. I'm sure there's a number of folks that want to speak. The first person on my queue is Commissioner Wexler.
Look where we find ourselves again. I don't want to wait until 2018. I want to take a chance. And I'm very proud of every city leader and everybody that has been coming to our meetings, reaching out to me, reaching out to my colleagues to keep the conversation going. I'm a realist. Y'all know I'm not pie in the sky, Cinderella kind of gal. But if you want to pull this off, and if we want to pull this off, I know that we can do this. I know we can. Yes, it's a short window, but we've got to at least try. Having 3 items on the ballot is absolutely a recipe for disaster. Mayor Sturmer and I communicate a lot. I represent half of the city of Weston, but he's also a friend of mine, and we talk a lot. And one of the things that I would like to compliment him on, and you, many mayors that are here today on, is your desire to find a solution here and consensus, coming to consensus. I mean, if we all don't feel good about moving something forward, then we're probably moving in the right direction. And let's keep reminding ourselves of that, because that's what consensus really is, that we agree that it's in the best interest of, but I may not be the happiest person, and the cities may not be the happiest, but it's still, we need this. Who knows what the legislature is going to do to us the next time they meet? Who knows if the bar will be raised to 60% or the requirement will be put out there for only a presidential race? Personally, I like a gubernatorial go-around. If you were going to ask me my druthers, I just think that more dedicated voters come out for a governor's race than a presidential race. But here we are in 2016. We have in front of us a document that absolutely shows compromise. And I'm supporting it. Everybody that has been in contact with me from cities, I have answered them that I am supporting this item moving forward. And I hope that we can continue this conversation going. My fear, and this is what I don't understand, my fear is how do we do this? How do you and we do this so that we have 1 item on the ballot, not 2 items? Not 2, because the public will absolutely be confused. How do we get there? So I need your help. We need your help. And Mr. Gorin and Mr. Cole and all of those brilliant minds, legal minds that have been working with everybody to try to find how we get there. Because the plan, we're going to have that plan. The cities have their plan. You have a 5-year plan. You're required by law to have a 5-year capital plan. Can you add another 5 years to it and another 5 and another? Of course you can. I have no doubt about that. But at least you have a starting point. So to hear that there's no plan and it's confusing troubles me. They just need to look or ask. The second thing, we certainly have a plan. What makes it encouraging for me isn't necessarily the 50-50, because we recognize as a Board of County Commissioners the O&M opportunity of a regional transportation system. And in an infrastructure tax, I cannot use those dollars. But in a transit tax, I can. So if the cities can take some of the burden, the financial burden of the transit tax off of the county through the proposed language of a required between 10 and 25%, that puts a minimum of 10% in my column. And so now what it's done is it's made it much more palatable to me as a county commissioner to be able to sell it and get out there and defend that. I think that it is absolutely an opportunity that we must continue to take advantage of, work on. If cities have to do an emergency meeting, then call an emergency meeting. You have the authority to do that. We have the authority to do that. I recognize the clock is ticking, but it starts here today by 5 of us telling Joni Coffey, we want to move forward on this. I heard Commissioner Ryan say, keep the conversation going. But I think that it's got to be much more determined than that. It can't be just keep the conversation going. It's got to be, I like this, and I support where we're going with this. And let's keep that conversation going so that next week I have an item before me in which to vote on.
The next person is going to be Commissioner Holeness, but I have a quick procedural question, if it's okay for Ms. Coffey. Our last commission meeting, we actually voted specifically to put an item on the ballot. That's there. If we decide to move forward to the 14th, and I know this is under Robert Rules of Order, this is the day, it has to be the next meeting that you can repeal it. Will we have the authority, if we come to a compromise, to repeal that action, even though it's not the next meeting? Or is that automatically going on the ballot no matter what if we don't take action on that today?
I want to be sure that I understand your question.
Yes.
Do you have to take action on the 14th in order to remove the transportation surtax?
Yes.
Yes, you do.
Okay.
Now, there is a possibility that something can be, any further potential for removing something from the ballot, we'd need to confer with the supervisor and her council.
Okay. Okay. My just thing was I always thought that if you do a motion for reconsideration, somebody on the prevailing side would have to reconsider it. I always thought that had to be the direct meeting afterwards under Robert Rules of Order.
It's not reconsideration. There's a way to get it done.
There's a way to get it. Okay, great. That's all I want to know. Commissioner Holeness.
Yes. Ms. Coffey, we're required to have 2 separate items. We can't have one item, can we? Is there a way to get there?
My preliminary reading of the statute says that you must have 2 separate ballot items. Now, there are sometimes ways to phrase the independent items so that they refer to one another, but I believe that the statute plainly requires, in fact, it has specific wording for the separate kinds of surtaxes that must appear on the ballot, yes for the tax, no against the tax, and another one it's just yes and no. So I would be troubled by trying to create a single ballot item, but there may be a way to have the 2 items refer to one another and be contingent on one another.
In terms of our timeline, we have to have this to the supervisor of elections by what date?
The supervisors indicated June 20th on another occasion.
I'm sorry?
I thought I heard her say the week of June 20th. I believe that by June 24th, we would be all right.
By June 24th. So we have a very short window in order to make this happen, if we are going to put it in front of the voters for them to decide whether or not they want to put this thing in place. It is heartening to see that we have not dug our heels in on either side to figure out how we find common ground for the good of the people we serve, at least to give them the opportunity to make a decision as to whether or not they would like to pay an extra 1 cent or whatever we come up with here. And for me, it's always been, how do we find balance to ensure that this tax that is regressive benefits those who are going to be most greatly impacted, the people who are lower income. That's been a major issue for me. Now, many lower income people depend on transportation, and you can do the studies and you'll find that. So there's a benefit there to them. I think there's a great benefit to Broward County on the transportation side, particularly, in that we send more money to Tallahassee and to Washington, D.C. than we get back, by far, too much. If we have the operation and maintenance money for a transit system, we will be able to draw down, in my estimation, probably hundreds of millions of dollars. And I see our Director of Transportation, Mr. Walton, nodding his head. It's possible for us to do this. If we don't have these dollars in place, then Broward County is losing and will continue to lose the opportunity to get more of our taxpayers' dollars back from Tallahassee and from Washington, D.C. So it is heartening to see us here in our conversation previously based on the definitive plan that was put together by our staff, actually allocation of where the dollars would go, the amount of dollars, what effect it would have on our system. I thought that we needed more than a mere half a penny. This gets us a little bit closer, because if you're willing to make the commitment for at least 25% to go towards infrastructure that accommodates transportation, then I think we move a little bit closer. Not exactly where I believe we ought to be, but it moves us a bit there in the essence of compromise. That's something that I'd be willing to support for us to get this item in front of the voters so that they can make a decision as to whether or not the cost and benefit analysis benefit them enough for them to support it going forward. So what I'm thinking we're going to have to do, if we're going to do this, we're going to have to work double time, overtime. We're going to have to put a lot of effort in on both sides to make this happen if we're to move it forward. But it's a big compromise on our part, I believe, to get to this so that the cities can get some of the dollars they're looking for. And I understand. I was a city commissioner also. I know that many cities have needs to do things within the cities. If we are able to get it through and get it in front of the voters, then there's a huge educational process that has to be undertaken for them to understand clearly what the pluses and minuses and how it benefits or not benefits them going forward, for them to make an informed decision as to what is in the best interest of all of us here in Broward County.
Thank you. Commissioner Furr.
Thank you, Mayor. First of all, my first inclination is to lock the doors and not let anybody out of here till we figure out the answer.
Fire hazard.
That's what I think we ought to do. Just let them go, and we figure this out together. Because I think this is a unique opportunity, we need to seize this opportunity. We've got everybody here. We've got some good proposals in front of us. I want to thank the conversations between Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Sturmer and all the other Mayor Sturmer. I'm sorry, because I think that has allowed for lots of the focus that was needed. I think we had lost focus. I think the MPO actually lost focus as well when it went only to infrastructure and started to forget some of the transportation part. I think we didn't have as good a focus and as good a plan as I think we should. I mean, I look at that, and I sent you all this stuff on the FEC. When I saw in our plan that wasn't there, I'm like, how can that not be there? Because yesterday I was at the South Florida Planning Council, and they passed their SMART plan. Their SMART plan talks about the regionalization of transportation through Miami-Dade, up to Broward, up to Palm Beach. What was number one on theirs? FEC. And why ours wasn't on there. What I've heard was that we didn't have certain permits. Well, last month they didn't either, but now they are tagging on with what all aboard is doing. So that's number one on their entire project. The numbers are there, how much it costs. What's interesting about it is it talks about not only the the capital costs, but station after station after station. And this is where I think we need to be developing a plan together. If that comes through, every downtown in Broward County, who's going to build the station in Hollandale, Hollywood, Fort Lauderdale, Pompano? Those are the kind of things we should be talking about, because that's part of the infrastructure that's going to need to be considered. We should actually be asking ourselves, how are we going to be negotiating with FEC? Not only Miami-Dade's about to be negotiating with FEC. We should be doing this all 3 counties together. And I know that there's an entity to do that, but we should be thinking, how do we do this together so we're not negotiating against each other? And those are the kind of things that I want us to begin. That said, I would like to support what I've seen be proposed. I would actually like to see the number. I see the number as 10 to 25%. I honestly think it needs to be a minimum of 25%, because when I look at those ways of connecting between all 3 counties, not only the FEC part, but the part they are talking about going up the northern corridor, up 27, up University. All those things connect all of us. Whether you're in a city that it has an older infrastructure and that is going to need this, and I absolutely understand the needs, particularly on the coastal cities, for infrastructure. When I look at Hollywood or Fort Lauderdale, and I see what they're going to need for climate change mitigation, seawalls. I think Fort Lauderdale had 125 miles of seawalls that needed looking at. That's more. They'll never get enough money on that. But I do think 25%. I would be more comfortable with 25% minimum. I'll be honest, and I know some cities are not maybe comfortable with that, but I think that would allow for. I think that's a good place for us to go. It also gets us to, and to the 0.75% that we were talking about. In terms of that compromise right there, gets us to that number in terms of the 50% that totally transportation and 25%. It almost gets us there. It's close. It's close. Right, you're right. I just realized that. I just did the math in my head, and it was closer, though. It's closer. So I could actually support this. I don't know how it gets on the ballot. You bring up a good question, and that's something I'd like to see. But last week, I absolutely do not think we can put 3 proposals on there. It needs to be, we need to be unified on this. And I actually think the cities are in a better position to sell this to the public than the county, because you can go step by step, street by street, what's going to be done. And I know that I'd like to, I know that as citizens, they look at the things that are right around them and what's going to be made better, whether it's their street, whether it's their sidewalk, whether it's greenways that connect all of us, all those things. I think we've seen what the school board did and was able to see in terms of every single thing in their neighborhood. I think it makes a huge difference. We're able to put forth the bigger picture in terms of transportation. I think we can sell that, because when I look at the most recent statistics talking about what's working bus-wise, we've actually seen a drop on bus ridership on the local, but we've seen a major increase on the regionalization buses, the Breeze bus, I'm not sure what you call them, Breezeway Express buses. There's actually, I think it's a 200% increase on that. So any of us that are going, if we start to think regional, that's our job to promote that. And we can promote that in conjunction with the infrastructure and the independent needs that the cities have. I want to see that. I want to see us go forth together on this. If we don't, it is not going to pass. So I'm in support of the proposal that's been put forth. I would like to see the 25% minimum. I think that's important, because we're going to need that, like I said, to build those stations and to complement the transportation infrastructure. So that's where I'm coming from. I'd like to see us, like I said, lock the doors until we get out of here, and hopefully we can get there today. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Sharief, Vice Mayor Sharief.
I'm glad to see that there is some sign of compromise here, because, for a while there, I was beginning to lose faith in the fact that the cities in the county could not come to a compromise. My concern was the fact that we still had to have 2 ballot questions, because I think that when you're asking the public for taxes of any sort, that they're not going to vote for 2. And I felt like the chances of both passing at the same time was slim to none unless we could connect them. And so how do we bridge the gap? Because I think in every meeting that I've been to, transportation has always been brought up. As recently as this week with the ULI committee, right? The first thing that came up was transportation. How do we get people to and from major areas in our county? And how do we make it easier to access those areas? And so while I understand that the cities want the infrastructure surtax, and I understand we are a regional body and we have to think regionally, we have to also think about every one of the municipalities. I just, without being able to combine these 2 taxes, I could sit here all day long and vote yes to this, but I think that one or both will probably fail. And so at this point in time, I'm willing to listen, and I'm willing to compromise, but I think that we all need to look at what's really important, and that is our transportation infrastructure. And so that's where I'm at right now, Mayor.
Thank you. Commissioner LaMarca.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to be relatively brief on this. I have to say that, what led us up to this, and I'm a person that tries to always be positive, and I guess what concerns me is a little bit of what happened. Is it's sad that there are these great people that are here and good policies, and no one like every single person in the first 3 rows, and Dan, that's the last time they're all going to stand up for you and sit and stay and whatever you want them to do, but everybody does a great job. I came from a city where I served 2 terms, and, I understand that there's subdivisions and subdivisions of the subdivisions, so it becomes, well, what's the county do? What do the cities do? And that type of thing. And trust me, when you're running from the city commission to the county commission, you answer that door, when you answer that question when you're knocking on people's doors. They think we do duplicative things, things like that. So my concern is that we didn't start from this point, but we're here now. And to Dan Lindblade and Charlie Calkins' point, we have to have a really good plan to sell people, because ultimately we're running a plan much like the school board did, and I don't think folks had a lot of confidence they would get that done, but they came together and they had a ground game, and they treated it like a candidate, and they ran that plan. Each school and each district and each community had something that was going to be done for them. Sadly, Northeast High School is still not done, and it's probably going to remain like it is for the next 100 years, but that's beside the point. Looking back on these type of things, and I said this to Cindy Ehrenberg-Seltzer when she was here with CSC, and this upset and disdain for the legislature and the Senate president with regard to having the gall to ask them to go back and ask the taxpayers to reauthorize a plan that helped distribute additional funds to children. The numbers were staggering, and the Broward Workshop got behind this, the chambers, the organizations, the economic development organizations here in the county. And it was that if we handled these services for children, we would deliver about $12 million, 12 to 15. If the CSC delivers it, it's 65 million plus. And they're needed, well-needed services, and that's how they're being delivered, and that's why they won with an overwhelming number of almost 3/4 of the vote. To get me there, and I've had this conversation with numerous folks, I'm not so much concerned about the sunset date where it goes away unless people vote it back in. I am concerned about the reauthorization date, and nobody's had that conversation. And all of the financial geniuses in this room can come up and tell me you can't bond something unless you've got 20, 25, 30 years. You've been running your cities for, the newest at, at 40, 50 years, up to 100 years. You have the financial backing within the city. If we can come up with a plan that we have a 10-year reauthorization of these plans, I'm on board. If we can't, I'm not, because what's been said here is 95, when Mayor Sturmer stood up, he said he represents 94% of the people. Well, I happen to know that the very city where I live is not represented, not physically, but in this concept, is not supportive of this. I happen to know from the mayor of Deerfield Beach that they weren't supportive. That's right there. There's 11 and 70,000 people. Well, I'm going. Listen, I'm going.
It's okay,
I'm going.
Mayor
on
Sturmer,
with
if it's okay.
If there's a
Please let the
resolution, I didn't get it, and the mayor reached out to me directly. With respect to what we have, to me, it was mentioned by one of my colleagues here that if we don't have these dollars in play, Broward County loses. These aren't our dollars to start with. These are the taxpayer dollars. These are our visitors. These are our residents. We need to show a little bit more, in my view, we need to show a little bit more respect for what is owned by someone else and earned by someone else, and not have plans for it before we encourage them and sell them on the idea that this is a great product, you should invest in this. We're talking about transportation. Barbara brought it up, Commissioner Sharief brought it up with regard to the big issue when we were in Sunrise last night and the night before, is transportation. It's getting around, choke points, it's getting to whatever we're going to do in redevelopment at the arena site, whatever, the other projects that Wisteria and Metropica are doing. A lot of density, a lot of things out there to do. I mean, there may be sports entertainment and other things with regard to our site. How do people get there? Well, I can tell you from Northeast Broward, you can either go up to the 10th Street and dream of it connecting to the Sawgrass, but once you get on the Sawgrass, you're there in 2 seconds, or you can go around 95 to 585 and 136. It's the east-west, it's all the people in between that box that are having a really hard time getting around. So we need to have a plan that's going to be able to get them around. As was mentioned by Commissioner Furr, if you live in the eastern corridor, which I was told the other night is only 10% of the population, which I haven't done the math yet, but there's a hell of a lot of people over there for 10%. We need to figure out how that commuter rail, whether it is hybrid tri-rail or separate commuter rail, can start and stop in Deerfield, Pompano Beach, Oakland Park, Fort Lauderdale, Wilton Manors, Oakland Park, however that gets decided, all the way down to Hallandale Beach. People will get out of their cars if they can leave them in a corridor where there's parking. In my case, I have an office at City of Pompano Beach City Hall. I'll drop my car there and come down here and not have to worry about the transportation. When they get down here, we're going to have to do something, Mr. Walton, with our transit center. We're going to have to get, I've had conversations with folks, we're going to have to, whether they use the bus or the train or all the board, when they get to that area, we're going to have to figure out a way that transit center isn't someplace that you would never, ever, ever let your mother or your sister or your grandmother or even yourself go sometimes. It is, and it's not us, but it is what is convening there, and that's not what we want to have here in the epicenter of Broward County. Still is Broward and Andrews, whether there are more people north or west of here or not. Dan mentioned a clear plan to move forward. We've got to figure out a way that there's one decision for people to make, and it's not whether it's deciding between ball fields, fire stations, and public buildings and city infrastructure versus city transportation or transit or infrastructure like bridges and road projects, or a complete transportation plan with rail, light rail, and transit. We've got to have one plan that they can look at. And I'll wrap with this. Unless I can get to a point where we can look at this in 10 years and the voters can, in essence, rate their government, rate their system, Because the bottom line is you get out of a, whether it's a taxi cab or an Uber or, maybe the shuttles are the same thing at some point, but you rate the service. It's as simple as saying 1 through 5 stars. You leave a restaurant, if you use Open Table, the next email you get is how was your food at the Mayor's Cafe? So you rate it and they know how they're doing. So I have to 5 stars. So we have to know that can be done. That shouldn't, and someone can tell me differently, then I'll understand. That shouldn't affect the ability to bond something. And so I'm not saying to change the sunset date, but we should be able to go back and decide whether we want to continue forward with this plan or not in that period of time. Save for that, I'm with Mr. Calkins when he says that we need to spend 18 months putting this together and then another 6 months selling it, because we haven't done that. We said we would do that, and I was, whether it's the TMA or the MPO, I've been in those meetings, and we've all said we want to do this, and we're hitting up against the edge of the window. I mean, we're at the we're half out the window, and we're at the point where we've got to tell Dr. Snipes what's going to go on here, and we just don't. I don't see that we have a plan of one. I see that you all have a plan for 31 cities, and I see that we have our transportation plan. If we can figure out a way to meld those together and look at it with a 10-year look back, I would be supportive.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to speak, and if nobody else is going to speak, I'm going to ask Commissioner Ryan to close. But, all right, so if you think about it, a whole lot has gone on this issue. And I think all of us have a lot of concerns. And the concerns are, I think, right now, where we are. And where we are right now is we're actually headed for 3 different initiatives, possibly a 4th, being put on the ballot. So let's talk about that. The first one is the one the county has already voted to put on the ballot. That's the transportation tax. Then you have the city's infrastructure tax, where I think last time I checked it was 94 cities representing 94% of the population voted to pass resolutions to put an item on the ballot. That's been given to the supervisor of elections, and it's my understanding that she's going to put that on the ballot. And then we have the third item that we're actually going to be dealing with on the 14th, where the county attorney's office has opined that pursuant to statute, we're basically transmitting, we changed the language, but transmitting what the cities passed to put on the ballot as well, but it's slightly different than what the cities have done, so that could potentially be a third one. And then we have what's before us today, which is compromised language that I know that Commissioner Ryan and Commissioner Wexler and Mayor Sturmer and Mayor Ryan and just about everybody else out there have been working very closely on to try to get through. So I also look at our dais, and I listen to what everybody had to say. There are 8 county commissioners. We don't have a 9th county commissioner. And we need 5 votes to do anything, so this is going to be, at the end of the day, pretty close. There have been, I believe, 5 people that have spoke positively about a compromise, and I think there should be a compromise as well. And so I think one of 2 things needs to happen. This is just my opinion, and I'm just one county commissioner. I think either the cities and the county figure out some compromise language for one ballot initiative, one proposal, put that on the ballot, or scrap the whole thing and wait till 2018. Because having more than one proposal on the ballot is not healthy and not fair to our residents, and it's not what we need to be doing. And having the cities and the county fight so much is not healthy either. So I have a few questions. And actually, Mayor Sturmer, would you come up to the mic? Mayor Sturmer, as always, it's very good to see you.
Good
And
to see you, Mr. Mayor.
I guess we've had a lot of conversations as well. You're a very
Yes, we
busy
have.
guy. So here are my concerns. Yeah, most of the folks know that I have been opposed to voting to put something on the ballot to increase the sales tax. I have concerns with that, but I'm willing possibly to change my position if there's compromise language. But I'm unwilling to vote for something if there's going to be other items on the ballot at the same time. And I'm looking at the timetable. Right now, cities representing 94% of the population have passed resolutions to put something on the ballot. So if cities representing 45% of the population do not repeal those, it's going on the ballot no matter what. And I know you can only speak for Weston, but you've been kind of working with everything. So I'm wondering, if this goes forward, will cities pass resolutions to repeal the infrastructure tax?
Mr. Mayor, I can commit to you that once we lock Ms. Coffey, Mr. Myers, Mr. Horowitz, Mr. Gorin, and Mr. Cole and his team in a room, we will get a clear answer, one, on whether one ballot question is possible more than everybody's understanding. I think when we put the minds together to legally research whether or not that can happen, we may come to a clear answer. We may come to the answer that after the research, there need to be two correlated questions. I understand your hesitancy. It's our hesitancy as well. But I think if we craft the language in a way that's correlated and related, and we sell it as one package, it'll be viewed as one package. To your question, would the cities rescind their resolutions? I believe that, without speaking on behalf of every city that has, should we get to that, the answer would enough cities would rescind their resolutions by way of emergency meeting, whatever is necessary to move that compromise forward. Yes.
Would, and I understand, and I definitely, you know, the problem with this, and this is what I understand, I definitely trust what you're saying. But it's very hard, of course, for you to speak on behalf of all the cities, because everyone's their own independent bodies.
You as well would have to do the same.
Right, no, I agree. What I would like to see is, this, I'm just suggesting this, you know, yeah, I know. Well, there's a lot of folks here, so I know they can, you know, absolutely. That to me is helpful.
The jazz
That's
hands are
good.
saying yes.
That's good. That to me is helpful. And actually, those are some very large cities, and I bet that's a significant amount of the population here in Broward.
Funny how that happens.
Absolutely. So I'm okay with that. So with that commitment, that, you know, this is something I'm willing to consider. But, and so I guess, Ms. Coffey, is what, Mayor, do you agree with Mayor Sturmer's assessment about having possibly one ballot? Can you explain that all to me? What's the issue? What's the deal?
There are two different taxes under the statute, and that's the core problem. There are two different permissions from the legislature to impose taxes. I think that the mayor's suggestion that they could be correlated, I think language could be drafted to correlate the two, and you could have a mutual destruct clause, I believe, in each of them as well. If one doesn't pass, the other one doesn't pass. But I think you're going to need two ballot items.
Okay.
I can be, you know, I can continue to talk with the city's lawyers, and we'll continue to look, but I'm pretty sure that's where we're going to come out.
Okay.
Mr. Mayor, let me also suggest this. As I said to Commissioner Ryan when we started before Memorial Day weekend, and he took me up on the offer, we are prepared to work 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, to get to whatever date, whether it's June 20th, June 21st, except for Frank, he's got to take a nap, June 22nd, 23rd, or the 24th, to get this done.
Okay.
The cities are committed to do that. We look for a partner through you and the county commission.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Mayor Sturmer. So with that said, that gives me more comfort. And I'm glad that the cities and the counties are finally moving forward to a mutually understandable position or agreeable position that also is that's more fair to our voters. And as you know, at the end of the day, for anything to pass, everybody's got to be on the same page. And like I said, my commitment, at least I'm just one vote, as opposed to I am as to increasing the sales tax, if compromise language comes before us, I would support it. I know I had, and I thank you all once again for your hard work, and also, of course, with yourself. I bet you don't want to pay one more cent in sales tax for the rest of your life, you know. So, but before we go to Commissioner Ryan, a few county commissioners wanted to chime in again. So it would be Commissioner Holeness and Commissioner LaMarca, and then to Commissioner Ryan.
Yeah, in terms of passing a resolution rescinding what the city has done, I think we also need to add support for whatever we come up with. So it's not just about pulling back what you did, but also supporting what we are going to, if we are able to come up with a compromise that is supported in your resolution going forward also.
Whatever the language needs to be to pull back one and throw 100% in favor of the correlated, related questions, that will be done.
Okay. And I, like Commissioner Furr, cannot support something that doesn't give us at least 25% of that half a penny, because again, it won't work for what we need to do. Miami-Dade County did a half a penny, and you can see the congestion that exists downtown. They have a fragmented system. It's not working. We don't need to put ourselves in that place here in Broward County and then be locked in for another 25 years to that.
Commissioner LaMarca.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to correct something that I said. The city of Deerfield did indeed pass a resolution. The mayor of Deerfield Beach is opposed. Second issue, one of the things that I wanted to make sure that was clarified, and I asked staff, but this is up to a $5,000 purchase at any one purchase, and then the additional penny would not be anything further by state statute, because I know that wasn't necessarily spelled out in the municipal version, but I wanted to make sure because that was a big issue if somebody buys a large investment in one item. The third thing is I didn't get any answers necessarily from anybody here, which isn't uncommon for me, but I also didn't get any nods or head shakes there about being willing to look at a 10-year look back. So I would ask the question. So yeah, yes and no, those are both acceptable answers, but not knowing isn't really good for me.
You might have to say no. That's fine. Before we go to Commissioner Ryan, I just want to add something I didn't add before. One reason for that it's very important, and I just want to ask Ms. Coffey. So if there is a compromise and there's a correlation between the two, that means the most that we could have is a 1 cent sales tax increase, not 2 cents, not 3 cents, 1 cent. Is that correct?
That's what I'm understanding from the compromise proffer that I've heard here.
Right. We cannot have anything on the ballot that is more than 1 cent. Commissioner Ryan.
Legally, we could have, for the infrastructure, either a half a penny or a penny. That's what the statute allows. And for the transportation, you can have a penny or any percentage less than a penny. The discussion really has gotten kind of drilled down on where the dilemma is. The cities have a real desire for flexibility in the allotment of funds to the cities, and that's why the movement went towards the infrastructure tax. When we were going to do the 70-30 split with 30% directly allocated to the cities, the western cities said, we've got a great transportation system, we can't spend that 30%, but we certainly have infrastructure needs. So I appreciated that, and Mayor Sturmer and I think 2 weeks ago, were moving in the direction of a recognition that because of the needs of the city for that flexibility, we have to have 2 separate ballot questions. As Ms. Coffey said, and I think that the learned councils that have been representing the cities will agree, we have to have 2 separate questions. It's interesting on how we can correlate. I mean, the mutual destruction provision has to be in there. They have to both pass or neither pass. We can get there. An interesting discussion was initiated by Commissioner Furr with regard to the coastal link, the FEC rail line, and that is critical to relieving congestion on I-95 and our US 1 and our other eastern north-south expressways. But I'm a member of the SFRTA. We, at our last month's meeting, we approved in concept, subject to further negotiation, an agreement between Tri-Rail and All Aboard Florida to connect Tri-Rail in Miami to the Miami Central, which is the downtown southern terminus of the All Aboard Florida line. The only access that Tri-Rail has is from the Tri-Rail line to Miami Central, and we do not have north-south access. We don't have north-south access through Miami-Dade County, much less into Broward County. So that is going to be, in my view, when we do get there, and the discussion, although I asked that perhaps could we put together something with the deal with All Aboard Florida and get some conceptual agreement to allow for Tri-Rail access on the coastal link, and no-go. Right now, the FEC is not interested in that discussion. Hopefully they will be in the future. It's going to be driven, as my colleague, Commissioner LaMarca, often says, by market forces. So when it's profitable for the FEC to run commuter rail on the coastal link, that's when it's going to happen. For Tri-Rail or Broward County or some consortium of Palm Beach, Miami-Dade, and Broward County to have access along the coastal link, those fees, which I perceive to be operating expense, could be very, very large. That's why I continue to express concerns about the operating and maintenance expenses for the expansion of rail in Broward County. So with that in mind, I want to continue these discussions. I want to just remind my municipal colleagues that any expansion that we do or improvement of transportation by the Broward County Commission is going to be more than 95% of those improvements are going to be in the 31 cities. So let's not lose sight of that. Let's continue to try to work together and see if we can come up with a compromise. And I thank you, all the mayors, for spending as much time here with the county commission, and I hope it was as interesting as one of your city commission meetings.
And so I guess that would mean, I guess 6 of us, from my understanding, have asked that the county continuously work with the cities in a quick fashion to try to come up with something that is reasonable and fair and a good compromise. And that, I believe that was the consensus up here.
Mayor,
Yes.
I hope we're not leaving it like that hanging here. I hope we offer some direction. I would say that from here, I believe we ought to be offering some direction as to where we go. We don't have a scheduled meeting again until the 14th. I know we can do that, but it would be good if we can have a clear pathway, direction as to where we go from today in terms of a timeline, what we're expected to do here, so that the cities knows where we are and whether or not we direct staff or however we do this to ensure that they know we are willing to go for a half a penny. With 2 of us stated 25%. I don't know what the rest of the commission take is on that, and I think we probably ought to try and send as clear a signal as we can from here so they go back knowing exactly what they have to work with.
And before we, before Mayor Sturmer, would you like to say something? I have also have Commissioner Furr on the dais.
I just want to
queue
say
as
the
well.
following. One, thank you for the discussion this morning. The cities that are here and those that couldn't be here, thank you. We thank you for the collegiality of trying to get to a final resolution where we put forth a 1 penny surtax that benefits your needs and benefits the city's needs. We believe collaboratively, we're prepared, like I said, to walk into a conference room next door. Somebody will order in the pizza, and we won't leave until we're done. We commit that to you, and we thank you in advance for giving the county attorney's office and the rest of staff direction to move forward with this. Thank you.
Commissioner Furr. Commissioner Furr, did you want to?
I just want to know if we needed to provide direction.
And I
And
think-
I understand
yeah.
what Commissioner Holeness is saying, so that it's very clear.
I think we should. You don't think so, Lois?
No, I honestly, first of all, you've got all size cities with all kinds of needs. That's why there's a range in there between 10 and 25%. Maybe through negotiation, that can be condensed. But to lock the city in at a given number for transit when their need may not be anything near that amount, let him negotiate. Let Mayor Sturmer negotiate. I think they get it.
Hey, guys, jazz hands, please, jazz hands. Or else we're coming to your commission meetings and clapping.
They let clap. They allow clapping.
Yeah, they do. Oh.
Exuberance is allowed at city meetings. So I honestly believe that, and I've heard the 2 of you, I'm not ready to say, this is it.
Okay.
That's not how you negotiate.
Then that, Commissioner Holeness, did you want to add anything?
I think that I've basically made myself clear where I stand on the issue. And hopefully our staff will go forward with working on something. But for me, again, there's a minimum where I am. And I can tell you, I'm not moving. I've moved enough already,
And
to be honest with you. I think that we've made a lot of compromises. I believe that we have to ensure that we're looking at the totality of Broward County. And I know cities have needs, and I support you in ensuring that you fulfill those needs. But at the end of the day, we're one county, one people. And sitting here looking at this from a regional standpoint, there are certain things that we need to have. We're coming from a long way from where we started to where we are at this point in time. I think that where we are is a good place. It's a place where I believe both sides can benefit. You will have funding to do infrastructure at your control, how you want it, where you want it. On the other side of it, we don't get all that we need for ensuring that we have a robust regional transportation system that benefits you wherever you are, whether in Western Parkland or in Fort Lauderdale, wherever you are. If we are able to put more people in mass transit and create a better roadway system, better synchronization of our traffic signals, and all those things, everybody who gets on the road in Broward County is going to benefit from it. And we all have to get on the road to get somewhere.
And before I go to Commissioner Ryan, for me, procedurally, just moving forward, I'm glad the county and the cities are going to attempt to work it out. After hearing Commissioner Wexler, I do think it should be somewhat open-ended, but at the same time, everybody needs to keep in mind that to get anything done, we need 5 votes, and we only have 8 county commissioners. So just as you all are negotiating, please keep in mind the comments that were made by each member of the county commission, because, which I think will be very important to see what we can get through. With that said, Commissioner Ryan.
I've listened very carefully to all of my colleagues on what your concerns are, and we've had this discussion for the past 6 months, even more. So I understand where all of you are at and what the concerns are. It's been refreshing to have this type of an open dialogue so that the municipal officials, the mayors, can also hear what the concerns are of this commission. So with that in mind, I have to have the flexibility to work out something that allows Mayor Sturmer to speak to 31 other cities and come to something that we need to deliver next week. Next Tuesday is pretty much getting near a deadline, so we'll work on it. Let me have the flexibility. We'll see what we can come back with on Tuesday.
Thank you, and thank you all very much for coming down here today. I very much appreciate it. I think this was very productive for the residents of Broward County, and thank you all for your service.